Hello, my name is Phil, and I'm a doctor who likes to play board games. For the past few years, in the month of March, I've dedicated my board game time to play Uwe Rosenberg games. And I had the chance to play Mercator, a Rosenberg big box game from 2010. This is an often forgotten and unfortunately out of print game, so I've had mixed feelings about talking about this game that isn't easy to find and play right now. But I've decided to leave you with my review of the game after multiple plays, in hopes that if this game does intrigue you, you can seek out a copy. I will say that at the time of this recording, there is a tabletop simulator mod available if you want to try that out on that platform. My review will encompass a quick overview of the game, its interesting mechanisms, some game comparisons, and a peer review of the good and bad about this game based on the comments of other players on Board Game Geek. Finally, wrapping up with my personal thoughts on the game. Mercator is a game where you are a merchant in the 1600s in light of the rise of Hamburg after the 30 Years' War, traveling across Europe fulfilling contracts, hoping to be the merchant with the most lucrative trade network. This game revolves around pick up and deliver with contract fulfillment, where the catch is when a contract is fulfilled, it does not leave your tableau, but can be held onto to fulfill on a later turn. But contracts can be sold for money to be used to buy bonus cards and buildings that offer victory points at the end of the game. Another aspect of this game is that when you travel across Europe on your turn, you gain or lose time in the form of a time token, which is not only used to access certain spaces in the game, but can also be spent on other players' turns to travel with them and fulfill your own contracts outside of your own turn based on the location they go to. As more time tokens are taken from the time board, at certain times you risk a loss of goods where you have to choose to lose a goods cube from a certain column of your supply. Now, there are variants of the game which includes not playing with this certain mechanism if that, immediately turns you away. Finally, there is a solo mode where you try to get the highest score possible over 17 rounds of play, altering a few rules to fit this solo mode. Game comparisons are interesting for this one because, in my opinion, this game stands out as a very unique experience, mechanically and thematically, especially from other Rosenberg games. So I have a hard time finding some Rosenberg comparisons to make with this one. Other contract-centric board games have been mentioned by others on Board Game Geek, such as Splendor, or even games that came out after Mercator like Anno 1800. All of these games feature an element of contract fulfillment and resource management, but each game tackles this mechanism a little differently, of course. Splendor is a lighter game with an engine building feel, and Anno 1800 has a lot more interaction when it comes to acquiring resources and spending contracts, trading with other players to be able to do so. The travel mechanism, allowing for play on other players' turns, to me is reminiscent of Lacerda games actually like Lisboa, which also came after Mercator a few years later, where paying attention to what other players are doing on their turns, where they're traveling to, for example, in Mercator, could be beneficial to the efficiency of what you could potentially do on your turn. So very similar in Lisboa, where you have those royal tokens that you can spend if someone takes the action of one of the noble. The passage of time as a resource, as a game trigger, and as well can be seen in other games too, like Village, another older Euro game, which was released a year after Mercator. Both games are very different. Village is a more worker placement centric game, but the fact that they both use time as a resource is very interesting. Looking at comments and reviews of other players of Mercator, a lot of these comments, of course, coming in and around the time the game was released, this game seems to have quite a polarizing experience. Many players praise the game for its quickness of play and its uniqueness among other Rosenberg experiences. The fact that you can travel with other players and compete for goods and contracts make this game feel more interactive than what it may appear to be on face value. It is a more tactical than strategic game, meaning that your decisions may be more reactive to other players' turns and may change from your turn to the next, rather than be a game that involves turn planning, like a few turns in advance, that may or may not be to a player's liking if you prefer a more strategic versus tactical experience. Many people consider this game to be bland in terms of theme, components, artwork, mechanisms, with an unclear rule book as well. Some people feel this game does not age well because of the simplicity yet clunky sort of mechanisms that are in play here. And despite the presence of some interaction points in the game, the types of interaction doesn't really work out for some players. The element of randomness of contracts, bonus cards, building cards, and even the loss of good mechanisms that I mentioned before does rub some players the wrong way as well. I originally gave this game a 7.6 out of 10 on Board Game Geek, and after replaying this game recently and redoing my critique of the game, my thoughts pretty much remain exactly the same. And so my rating is still a 7.6 out of 10. So for me, this game suffers a little bit from rules clarifications, from a sort of mediocre rulebook. But once the rules are intuited, this game does tend to play quickly and be fast. I do like the interaction in this game, and the quickness of play too feels very much akin to a game like Glass Road from Rosenberg's repertoire. I'm also not a fan of the loss of goods mechanism. I think even though one might argue this is thematically integrated, I would rather play with a variant where this is quote unquote turned off. The solo experience is actually more strategic for me because you have total control of where you go. No one is following you. No one is grabbing cubes from underneath your feet or taking contracts from you. There is more planning ahead in your turn, so to speak, in the solo version. And so I really do appreciate that. I like the changes that are made to make the solo experience work. So it's a quite interesting experience. It's a little different, but mostly the same compared to the multiplayer experience. I agree that this game is more of a tactical, though, when you do play it as a multiplayer experience. So it's not one that would feel rewarding to play over and over again because you're not really, I guess, getting better strategically, figuring out the games and finding different avenues of play that might differ from one game to the other. It's essentially containing a lot of randomization of the different cards that you have and finding the most efficient opportunities to pursue some of those cards, but also at the behest of what other players do. And so it really is, I think, more player dependent than game dependent on how the game feels from game to game. And so I do prefer a more strategic experience. And if I want a fast interactive Rosenberg game that has a little bit more strategy, but still includes some of the randomness and variability that I enjoy, I turn to Glass Road, Newsfjord, Canal as some of those experiences that I can kind of crunch down into about an hour or an hour and a half. But I like having Merkator in the back pocket for, if I want to enjoy some mechanisms that include like pickup and deliver and contract fulfillment. It does feel a little bit more unique when it is compared to other games outside of Rosenberg's repertoire, right? I do, like the other games that I mentioned, it does include this mechanism that you don't see in other Rosenbergs, but it has kind of like that Rosenberg touch to it that makes it feel different and stand out compared to other contract fulfillment games, whether they're from this time period, like 15 years ago or even since. And so it still feels unique enough that I enjoy having it in my collection. I probably won't play it a lot, but when I do want to play it, like every year, maybe once or twice a year, I want to pull it out and just come back to it. And so I think it's good enough for that. And so if you do, feel like it's a game worth your time based off of how I've described it and rated it, you can try it out on Tabletop Simulator or try to find a copy as well. But in any case, that's my review and my thoughts on Merkator. Let me know what you think of the game if you've played it, and hope to catch you on the next video. Thank you.